It never ceases to amaze me what kind of stuff people throw in the trash. So I found these pieces of metal here thrown out, and I've seen a lot of pictures of those raised garden planters online, and I thought it would be perfect to give it a try at making one. So it's crazy. I actually planned ahead and I made some measurements, and I even wrote those measurements down at the beginning of the project, which is frankly more planning than I've ever done. Now, I also found these 2x4s that were thrown in the trash. And if you look here, they are actually straighter than the kind of stuff that you typically find at Home Depot. So that was a huge win. I really didn't go in with a detailed plan for this project. I just measured what size those pieces of metal and 2x4s were and kind of designed it around what I had. Once I had everything cut to length, I ripped a couple of those 2x4s in half, making some 2x2s, which I would use for the frame. Now, this Kreg pocket hole jig is one tool that's essential to this project, at least if you're going to go with a similar design that I went with. The great thing about it is it allows you to attach these screws from an angle, and you can attach them on the inside. That way you keep all of your joinery completely concealed, but it's still surprisingly strong even though it drills in at an angle. So I attached those pocket screws, making a square. Then I made another square. Then I attached those squares, and get this, I made a cube. Once I had my cube assembled, I took some 2x4s that I had already ripped in half, and then I ripped them in half again, so I have some 1x2s, and these I attached to become the slats at the bottom of the planter. I like to use a clamp when attaching these to keep things tight before I actually have the screws attached. That way it doesn't wiggle around, but it stays in place. What I normally do at this point in the project is finish assembly, and then promptly regret not sanding earlier on when the nooks and crannies and corners and whatnot were easier to reach. So this time I did the smart thing, and I sanded before attaching the metal. So now that I have these braces, I need some boards to go across the other way to actually hold the dirt inside the planter. Now, in the spirit of making sure that everything is made from recycled materials and completely free, I'm going to use some pallet wood. So I got these scraps, I just got to cut them down to size and then fill in these cross braces. I did need to cut down 2 pieces of that corrugated metal just a little bit to fit inside the cube, and so I found that the oscillating tool makes quick work of that. Now, I was going to use an 18 gauge nailer to attach this metal, and then quickly found out that my nailer does not go through this type of metal, so instead I ended up screwing them. Thankfully, I was able to screw it from the inside, and this is going to be filled in with dirt, so those screws won't be visible, and it really doesn't matter what it looks like. Now for the bottom, you can see these pallet wood pieces do not fit in well, but again, this is going to be filled in with dirt. It doesn't matter what it looks like. In fact, I even did the ugly cross bracing there. I realize there's still a lot of gaps, but that's actually a good thing because I still want some space for drainage, that way water can seep through. I did attach this weed barrier here too though, and that will help keep the dirt in. I wanted to rip a 2x4 in half, but my benchtop bandsaw wasn't powerful enough to cut through. So I did one pass through the table saw to get the cut started, and then I felt a little safer finishing the cut on the other half on the bandsaw here. Now the first cut I made, I forgot to hit record, but you can see these boards are crazy bowed. When I finished the cut, it blew apart and made a super loud popping noise because there was so much stress on the wood. So definitely something to be careful of if you're ever ripping apart wood that is not fully dry. Since I split this wood using some unconventional methods, I decided to throw it through the planer just a few times to make sure that they were all equal in depth. Here you can see the purpose of these boards is to cap off the top of the planer. Now this is mostly for the sake of aesthetics, but the edge of that metal is also really sharp, so it's kind of nice having something covering it up. I am clearly not an expert woodworker, but I like to think I'm usually pretty decent. However, I have to admit when it comes to nailing these mitered angles, I seriously suck. Like, it was so bad, the gaps were horrendous, so I decided to test the theory that wood filler can fix any mistake. So I loaded it up with wood filler, filled all those nail holes, and then I just did a quick sanding down. It's not perfect, but I think it ended up good enough for me. And after I put the finish on, it definitely helped cover up those mistakes. After finishing this planter with 2 coats of this waterproof finish, it's time to fill this thing up with dirt and kick off gardening season. So here you have it, a raised planter made completely from items found in the trash.